So,
No worries. Okay, so how familiar are you with this genre that seems to be relatively in its infancy and seems to be ride the line somewhere between science fiction and fantasy, and that is steampunk.
um, I I know I'm familiar with it, and I'm
Mhm.
also inherently fascinated by it because the concept of steampunk sort it interests me. The idea of this world where, if I'm, of course, I could be completely off here, but the idea of a world where steam power evolved to be the dominant force.
Yes, and if
As a,
the fashion is still very much sort of Victorian London.
yeah. And I mean, and I do find it interesting. At least
Mhm.
the concept is very interesting to me, at least, especially with like the technology and how intricate the technology gets, while at the same time staying simple.
Yes, there was actually a an alternate a Transformers comic that was a steampunk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll look it up and I'll do a screen share.
Okay.
And they were basically old trains
Hmm.
and such. There's a okay. I have a question for you. Steampunk, is it a genre or is it an aesthetic?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd say it's both, depending upon what you're talking about it with.
Right.
I mean, if we're talking fashion, it's definitely an aesthetic
Yeah.
because it's a lot of emphasis on gears. It's a lot of emphasis on gears and old fabric and lace and sort of that. I see.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just talk a bit so it keeps me up there. So there's Optimus as a train, Bumblebee, there's a Shockwave as like a steamboat, Cybermen heads for some reason, Starscream is like a four-engine biplane, which looks fantastic. So anyway, I'll turn screen share off now. So you were saying
Interesting.
as sort of as cosplay, because you don't really
Mm-hmm.
cosplay. Then when you see them, they're not a specific character. They're just they've
Yeah.
got the top hat and the goggles and and a gun and some
Mm-hmm.
clockworky type thing.
Definitely, and especially with the emphasis on steam power. Like you'll see them walking around with like a stovepipe hat with a actual like pipe coming out of it.
And the really good ones have steam coming out.
Yes, I've seen. Not caught in that. Yeah, I've seen a couple of those. Where as far as a genre, I do know that it's like in comics and some certain novels.
Hmm.
I remember there was one that made it really big and actually got national attention
Yeah, and that was
in the states,
hmm
and that was the Wind Up Girl.
the Wind Up Girl.
Well, actually, I just looked it up. It's more biopunk, but
Oh, okay.
it's basically it has to deal with some of the similar themes. Yeah, it's just called the Wind Up Girl,
Okay.
and it got it.
Sorry, what do you mean by biopunk?
Sort of like how we have steampunk is one particular punk genre where the emphasis is on steam power
Yeah.
and the aesthetic of steam power. Then you have biopunk, which I should have kept that article up because they actually had the biopunk, biotechnology and punk. So basically, it has to do with modifying your own genetics.
I see. To give
And
yourself
of
cat's
course,
eyes or something.
yeah, and then there, of course, there is the granddaddy of them all,
Uh huh.
put forward by William Gibson basically put forward primarily by William Gibson himself, cyberpunk. Which that hairy beast is another subject for another day. But what I'll just say about that is that cyberpunk is basically jacking into the internet. Like, you actually have like something in the back of your head, like sort of like the Matrix or Johnny Mnemonic, if you will, where you actually plug yourself in and do a net dive.
Yep.
Steampunk is definitely there's actually a comic I know of called Girl Genius.
Okay.
And it is a Steam. Girl Genius is about Agatha Heterodyne, who's basically she is a genius. She basically is an inventor. She makes machines, but it takes place in a cyberpunk or a steampunk world.
Okay.
In fact, let me find the image and I'll do the screen share as well.
Okay, so it's a cyberpunk story in a steampunk setting.
Well, it has cyberpunk elements, but it is very much a steampunk world. In fact, here is, let's see how we do this. Screen share. Entire screen. And we'll just hide my project.
Oh yes.
See, like you have the clocks, you have the little automatons, so like tin toys. So, yeah, sort of aesthetic.
I see.
But it's a comic that's been around for years. It's been, if I remember correctly, it was originally published in print before becoming a webcomic. So technically, it's actually 13 years old.
Oh, okay.
And still going. It's going strong. So, but steampunk is definitely a fun genre. So.
And still very much in its infancy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There are those, because I was looking into it the other day, and there's a novel called The Difference Engine, and that apparently is, the steampunk novel that hasn't bested yet. But I think, quickly going back to cyberpunk, I think you were saying it is about jacking in, and it certainly is. But also, to me, cyberpunk is almost like a gritty future.
Yes.
Where at some point in that history could have been a book that was science fiction that explored the moral implications of having that technology, and they rolled with it. They thought, this is great technology.
Actually, there is a book that explored the very first cyberpunk book, technically.
Yeah.
William Gibson's Neuromancer.
Oh, I think my sister's read that. Neuromancer.
Where he basically puts forward the idea of all of those ideas, and he evolved it from there. And from there, we get Johnny Mnemonic, Cyberpunk 2020.
Oh, is that a movie?
No, it's a tabletop RPG. Shadowrun, certain elements of Shadowrun. But at the same time, steampunk is a very romantic sort of thing. It has that romanticized edge to it.
Yeah, where everything is beautiful.
Yes. Even though, like, the atmosphere is full of the coal dust and stuff, but it's very, like, it's this very almost romantic setting, sort of like how, consider how we view pirates, like the age of piracy. It's not like, it was actually more like actual, like, grit and grime, and people basically doing these horrible things to try and ferret out an existence in this world that had basically forsaken them as criminals. Twist that around, and we have, like, piracy is looked upon as it's not so much about that. It's about swashbuckling and these codes of these pirates and these famous buccaneers who simultaneously try to screw each other over while trying to basically find the next big treasure. Steampunk is very much a similar thing. It's about these great heroes and noble scientists and their ladies, or lady scientists, in the state of Girl Genius, and then essentially you have these. intellect. It's very much more romanticized, but also intellectual, more about inventors and about scientists and
Yeah.
their.
The more the more you talk about steampunk in that way, the more I'm thinking. Like everyone that I've shown the 3-page synopsis of my novel that I'm writing, they said, "Oh, it's steampunk," without me thinking that I'm writing a steampunk. But the more you say it like that, I've got these tropes and conventions in there that I didn't even realize were steampunk. But also, another thing that seems to be in steampunk is there is magic and there is science, and they are separate.
Yes.
They are separate, because I know some novels, they talk about fantasy and magic, then somewhere along the line, oh, it's all really science and explainable. Whereas steampunk doesn't do that. Science, magic, and they just live harmoniously in that world.
Have you ever heard of Full Metal Alchemist?
I've heard of it, and I've seen 1 or 2 episodes, so I'm aware of it.
That, I guess you could call steampunk because of certain elements and the way technology is. But to me, that's probably the best example of there's magic and science, but they're the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Especially like the more steampunkish elements. I could be completely wrong here, but the more steampunkish elements for me are like the auto-mail arms, the fake artificial limbs, and stuff like that. But it has the magic. But yeah, you are right. There are magical elements, and usually, from what I've seen, is that the element that magic and the science in those worlds are opposite sides.
Okay, like one is good, one is evil.
More like they're competing with each other.
Oh, I see.
At least that's how I would see it.
So there's one camp of people saying, no, science is the way to go, and the other camp saying, no, magic is the way to go.
Yes.
Right. Why? See, here was the thing that I had the problem, because I've never felt that magic and science were compatible. And in my novel, that was my challenge. In a world that is very heavily, obviously, a science world, given that it's, quote, about robots, unquote.
Right.
And introducing magic into that world without it being jarring or seeming out of place.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I have this fantasy that when my novel comes out and is popular, it will be, quote, like the little quotes on the back they get from famous authors that someone say, this is the definitive steampunk novel.
Perhaps.
I don't know if that will ever happen. I'll probably let you read it once I've finished it. But I've written, as I said on Facebook, I don't know if you saw it, I've not written myself into a corner. I've written myself into a large, wide open field.
Ah.
Which is a bit challenging, because now I have to rope myself in.
I've been there.
Yeah. So
I do know that I was gonna yeah, I too work in I also work with certain elements like that in my own writing.
Mm-hmm.
Except I found a way to write off, because there is magic in that world. However, what it is magic is at its core.
Yeah, sorry, I'm pulling faces. I'm just looking at cosplay, very questionable cosplay.
No, that's cool.
So magic at its core.
Magic at its core can only be basically the system I came up with in order to answer that question about, well, how come these people can use magic, but these people clearly can't? My answer was this: there are 3 kinds of magic in this world.
Yeah.
There's life, which is nature's magic, the things that we see around us. Man's magic, which is trickery. And God's magic, which is miracles. And that the demigods that are only able to use they have magical like powers because they are closer to divinity than humanity is. And so people that actually can use these magical abilities are actually sort of closer to either the Forsaken spectrum or the more humane spectrum. So that's my
Okay.
own bent. So
There's something I haven't. Normally, I start each of these podcasts out with the same question, and that is, what is your earliest memory or experience with steampunk?
ooh ah, I believe this counts, but
Mhm.
to anyone who says otherwise, screw it. It counts. Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Okay, the Disney version or the book or the
The Disney version,
uh,
because I guess you could call it steampunk because of
uh-huh.
the way people dressed and the way they had that like essentially it was a very historical novel, but it had science fiction elements that were sort of steampunkish. It's either that or the god awful Wild Wild West movie
Oh,
starring Will Smith
Will
and Kevin
Smith.
Kline.
Apparently, that was based on an old TV series.
Yes, I've actually seen the old TV series. Is fantastic
Hmm.
because it's about a smart-ass cowboy and his down-to-earth, serious friend.
Right, I see. Whereas the movie completely missed the point.
Yeah, the movie basically just kind of like, what if we made turn this into a really ultra serious story about like
Hmm.
these two government agents trying to fight for the greater good and all this stuff, and they basically did this. All
Hmm.
right, old show. And so now people are just kind of like, oh, Wild Wild West. Oh, you mean the huge effing mechanical spider?
Mm, mm, mm. But also, there seems to be two camps of steampunk. There is the the British camp, which is the more Victorian London,
Mm-hmm.
and there is the American camp, which is the more somewhere between the Wild West and the 1920s. That's sort of the gangster
Yeah,
era.
mm-hmm. Definitely. De- definitely. Because I mean, I've seen a little bit of it, but yeah, because well, it's the two evolution of the two cultures.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's sort of that parallel that in the Victorian age in America, we were still
Hmm.
very much attached to the West. The West was dying,
Mm, hmm,
but
hmm.
the West was relying on steam power.
Yeah,
At the same time, we had Tesla.
yeah.
So there is that whole Tesla and Edison, and so there's this whole like the whole thing that Tesla and Edison worked in conjunction in that time frame. If they would have worked together in the steampunk era, how that would have evolved differently in America was that electrical based weapons
Hmm,
with
hmm.
steampunkish stuff. But also like the 1920s was like the rise of the small time crook,
Hmm, hmm.
the evolution of what would become the gangsters.
Yeah.
So I
Uh,
guess it's just it's basically just two different cultures.
yeah, throwing their projecting their history and ideals onto this
Mm-hmm.
new. I personally think it's more of an aesthetic than a genre because it's still in its infancies. I don't think the genre has any tropes. Like, take fantasy for example. There's good guys, there's bad guys, there's some kid trying to fight up a great evil against insurmountable odds. So Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, they are very much fantasy movies. Although Star Wars is a space opera. When you see science fiction, you know it, but
Right.
when you see steampunk, the only thing that gives it away is the look. Imagine you could do. Imagine if you repainted Star Wars with steampunk. Suddenly, it's steampunk. Steampunk just because of the way it looks.
True. It is. It does reach that level where you're kind of, yeah. It is a good question. It does reach that level where you're kind of like, okay,
Hmm.
that is actually a possibility, but also, I guess it's like any genre. It does rely on a certain aesthetic.
True, but Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings don't look that similar,
Right. But
do they?
they're, well, not really, because Lord of the Rings is more of a mythological.
Yeah.
fantasy based upon the Ring Cycle by Wagner, as well as the Nordic legends that are tied into it. Whereas Harry Potter is more about children wizards,
Right. Going to
or even,
Wizard School.
or if we introduce the middle ground, the Chronicles of Narnia,
Mm-hmm.
which by the end of that book, by the end of that series, C.S. Lewis just basically, I like to think he just basically went, you know what? I'm killing this turkey, so I'm going to make this last book as creepy and dark as possible because it's
Mm-hmm.
the end is the because it's the end of the world as I know it, and I feel fan freaking tastic. At least that's how. But there is a. I mean, it's to go back to what I said. It is reliant on a certain aesthetic, but but more to the extent than others. Like sci-fi has certain elements that make it sci-fi.
Yeah.
Certain aesthetic. Mostly today, it's that gritty future. Think Blade Runner or 1984
Mm. But I would
or
say
mhm.
science fiction is more so in what it explores, the underlying question being, what is it that makes us human?
Yeah. Whereas steampunk more or less explores what if.
True, but so does cyberpunk,
Yeah. But
and probably
cyberpunk also, well,
biopunk as well.
cyberpunk I know explores a lot more of the questions of transhumanism, the next step in human evolution.
Hmm.
The great where will we go from we've hit a point where our species is at a level that we are almost insurmountable as a species.
Yeah.
But where's the next point? What's the next step? In the words
Hmm.
of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where do we go from here? So
Hmm. Damn it, I was going to say something. What was I talking about? I mean, we're talking about steampunk, but
we were talking about the steampunk aesthetic and how it's kind of closely tied into steampunk itself.
oh, science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
That it does very much explore. Where was I going with it? What it is.
What it means to be human.
Yeah. I had something to say. I don't remember what it was. Uh, it was along those lines. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's more what it explores rather than how it looks. Like, because you can get like
True.
just a science fiction just set in the modern world, and it's meant to be sort of come across as realistic, just ordinary, everyday, like cloning, and it might explore clones,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Excuse me. Whereas if you look at Star Wars, they're not exploring the moral dilemma of clones; they just make them.
Right. Well, also, if we go to the actual root of Star Wars,
June,
what?
June, the actual root of Star Wars. George Lucas has mentioned many times that
Yeah.
June was a big inspiration for Star Wars,
Yeah.
or for Tatooine
Exactly.
anyway.
Mm-hmm. Or yeah, it's basically it's based on it's based on two things: World War II
And
and
Flash
a
Gordon.
bunch of Flash Gordon and a bunch of old samurai films.
Yep.
Because you cannot look me in the eye and tell me the Force is not meant to be spiritual cheat.
True.
Because
Religion.
it is. Yeah. It's
Well,
surrounded us by.
yes. Well, he said in an interview that if he just took, basic religious concepts, and boiled them down to their core, whereas I've had friends in my life that tried to convince me that Star Wars was a film that did science and magic side by side, trying to convince me that the Force is magic, which it is not.
It's it's spiritual. It's a spiritual force.
Yeah, but I
It's
certainly
key.
wouldn't call it
It's yeah.
magic.
it's chi. Let's bury that. Let's put that sleeping dog to rest and basically say it's chi.
Yep.
It's meant to be. It's basically a combination of George Lucas basically took. What if we had chi and took Bushido and mysticism and some of the more mystic elements of the samurai code and basically said let's make this into something wholly unique.
Yeah. Something. Yeah. Yep. Just sticking with Star Wars for a second. Have you been keeping up with the Star Wars Rebels preview?
No,
Not interested?
not really.
Clone Wars.
After 1, 2, and 3, I kind of had this sort of after 1, 2, and 3. I was psyched for all. She's like, oh, all the Star Wars stuff, and then they just kept cranking it out and kept cranking it and cranking it, and I was just I kind of lost that taste as well as I started looking back without the goggles of nostalgia on my face. So basically, I just like, wow, that actually wasn't that
That
good.
good.
Also, this happened to me. Huh? Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Yeah.
14 hours of my life dedicated to galactic conquest that I'll never get back, and I don't regret a single second of it.
Apparently, the next Star Wars game is going to be a Battlefront game published by Electronic Arts. Yay!
Evil incarnate.
No.
Well, we all know that EA is just actually short for Evil Associated.
Yeah. Or you could be mean and say evil assholes.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But the fact that Disney went with EA, ugh.
It's because EA is one of the big gaming giants that they'll get exposure, whether legal or not, because they do have some questionable business practices about firing certain people, certain companies. I've heard things through the rumor mill that basically they don't treat certain employees very good. Additionally, after what they did to Dead Space 3, they can go royally F themselves.
Yeah,
because that story was just flat out shit.
Yeah, for me it was I've never really liked them that much as a company, but for me it was SimCity, the newer one.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just basically, it was so broken it was it wasn't even playable.
Yeah. And that was just atrocious for a launch title. That and their employees' negativity towards the Wii U, which the company CEO has since apologized for. But that doesn't take back the fact that they did that. We've gone seriously off topic. There was a steampunk game recently for the... What was it called? It was on PC... And it was really recent. Do you remember what it was called by any chance?
BioShock Infinite?
No, not that well known. Like, it's just like one word.
Do you remember what it was about?
There was a guy in prison, and he was wronged by the law, and he had to break out, and he did it all sort of under the radar, so to speak. What's it called? You know what? It's escaped me completely. I don't know if steampunk's a thing that's strong enough that we could even do a whole topic on it, even though we're trying to. Although, can I just say that Star Wars Rebels is actually looking pretty good. It doesn't look like wooden puppets, thank God. Although it does still stylistically look like a follow-on to Clone Wars, which it is meant to be. but it just looks like a typical Saturday morning cartoon with computer graphics instead of hand drawn. But this time they're actually just following that one group of rebels. They're not going to follow around different groups. They're not going to follow over here, then over there. And it is set. See, I thought it was set basically after episode 3.
Yeah.
Like right after. It is not. It is set 5 years before episode 4.
Excuse me for a second. I need to use the restroom. So
Okay.
I will
no
be right
worries.
back.
So, yeah. If Maddie or Dave would join us now, that would be fantastic. But sticking with the Rebel, Star Wars Rebel, I'm just wondering if it conflicts at all with the Force Unleashed or the old cartoon series Droids. And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and the Droid series actually takes place sooner than what I thought. So I don't think there will be a conflict. It's just there's a bit in one of the previews for Star Wars Rebels where you see one of the rebels spray paint the rebel insignia on the side of one of the TIE fighters. But I didn't think that came up until the Force Unleashed, where they were all standing around at the table in the end, and Princess Leia is sort of dusting off the table and said, "Oh, we need something to make a symbol so we can be part of the rebellion." Although, for what is canon, I know this much, and this is certain. Anything that happens on screen, so a movie or a TV show, takes precedence over anything that happened in a video game. And anything that happened in a book also... Wait, okay, so basically it's here. On screen, book, so in writing, video game. So what is canon is what happened in a TV show or in a movie. Then after that, it's what happened in a novelization. Then after that, it's what happened in a video game, of course, because with The Force Unleashed, you have the 2 alternate endings. So you in that case, you have to go with the novelization. And I would like it if they made it, even if it was a straight-to-DVD movie of just all the cutscenes put together and all the gaming parts just made animated and fill in the blanks and actually make it a series out of it. There's probably enough cutscenes in there that you could make a series, and there's 2 games, so there's no reason they couldn't. And I am hoping to one day see an Old Republic movie, and I think the Boba Fett movie is coming. Dave should be here anytime soon, I think. And that sounds like Zachary coming back into his room. And Maddie is, I think, going to be extra late, so...
Sorry
excuse me. No worries. I was just filling in, talking about Star Wars Rebels and what is canon in the Star Wars universe. From top to bottom, it goes on screen, in writing, video game. So if there's any contradiction, it's whatever happened on screen takes precedence. Dave should hopefully be joining us soon.
Okay. Well, if we run out of steam,
yeah.
we can always talk about the other punks.
Oh, Cyberpunk, sure, and Biopunk.
Biopunk, I don't know a whole. Well, actually, Bioshock. So,
yeah,
my favorite video game of all time. So,
really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which involves body modification. So.
and that's body modification as in what's that movie coming out? Lucy.
Oh,
Um,
it didn't do so well in here, and it didn't do so well amongst the critics in the States. It was kind of goofy.
I don't. Have you seen it? I've only seen one
No,
preview.
they advertised the hell out of it.
Mhm.
Um, last movie I saw in theaters was the Guardians of the Galaxy. So,
And that was an
hmm?
excellent, excellent film.
Yes. Did you stay to the end credits?
Yes, I did.
Why are you letting that thing lick your face? It's disgusting.
Of course, that's got all of the fans in an uproar that there just might be a new Howard the Duck film.
They actually, I think I saw something. Marvel said they're just like, no, we just threw that in there because it made sense.
Yeah.
Also, the director wanted it in there. Apparently, I think James Gunn wanted it in there.
hmm Apparently, he's in. If you really pay attention in that scene with him before, you actually see Howard the Duck in the background somewhere in the actual film, in the course of the film. But he may have a bigger role in the second film.
Actually, fun fact:
hmm
James Gunn's producer
Yeah.
had a guest spot in the movie.
Oh, okay.
His name is Lloyd Kaufman, or as some people watching this might know him as. He is the creator of Tromaville Entertainment.
hmm Tromaville.
He is most famous for creating the Toxic Avenger.
Oh, yes. He guest starred in an episode of The Angry Video Game Nerd once, I believe.
Yes.
Played the game, and there was a cartoon based on it called Toxic
Mm-hmm.
Crusaders, which was very much came about at the time of the popularity of Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
I still
But
remember the theme song.
uh, for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or
No,
Toxic?
for Toxic Crusaders. Um,
Ah,
had no friends, no girl to love me till I got radioactive ugly. That's the only line I
nice.
remember. But
But I'm just gonna show this really quick. I'm gonna screen share this really quick.
hmm
Um, this was Lloyd Kaufman as he appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy. He
so
was
that's exactly how he looked.
yes, he's actually one of the prisoners yelling as the Guardians show up for the first time. So, but he actually, I met him at Comic-Con
Oh, okay.
when I went in 2013, and I got a DVD signed by him, his copy of Tromeo and Juliet, a basically B-grade exploitation version of Romeo and Juliet, and it was the most beautifully awesome thing I've ever seen because it gets all the points right.
hmm
And I met him, and I was like, "I love you, man. I love you. I love your film. It makes me want to watch more of your films." He goes, "Oh, thank you." And I said, "If you would mind," and I opened up the DVD, pulled the dust jacket out, and said, "Could you please sign this for me, sir?" And he goes, "Of course." He's like, "Of course, no problem." And he goes, "Just remember, Toxie loves you."
hmm
And so I have this DVD on a shelf that basically says, "To Zach, Toxie loves you. XOXO, Lloyd Kaufman."
Nice.
So he's a great guy. He's funny, but
hmm
um, but yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, great film. Definitely looking forward to another installment. I am so happy they showed Thanos. Like actually had
Yes.
Thanos speak,
Yeah.
and it was actually kind of hard to see, but under all that makeup,
hmm
for Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah.
That's actually the same actor who plays King Thranduil in The Hobbit.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, and then the other movies, yeah, I've seen a bunch of movies, but haven't seen Lucy yet. Probably gonna wait till it goes to the dollar theater.
Makes we don't have one of those here. We just have the one theater, and if you want to see a movie, that's where you go.
Yeah. We
David
have
has.
ah
Hello. Yeah, you were saying about theaters?
yeah we have our standard movie theater, and then we have the dollar theater, which is after a movie basically has its run, and then gets delegate. Basically, they say, "Oh, we aren't going to show this anymore because we got these other big movies coming in from Hollywood or these premieres."
Hmm.
They relegate them elsewhere. They relegate them to these smaller theaters that are basically they're a little cheaper, bit run down, but you basically pay a third of the price of a normal movie ticket to basically sit and watch something on a less than superior sound system. But it's kind of worth it. It's an interesting experience.
Hmm.
A lot of parents take their kids there because it's free and it's cheap. It's free, or it's free for them. It's kind of cheap, but yeah.
Okay, so David, there disappeared.
Mike's he said his mic's not working,
Oh, okay.
so he'll be all right.
Uh, uh, Here we go. He's back. So Dave, I gotta
Hello.
ask. Hello.
Oh,
Uh,
it's working good.
right. Is it David and you just go by Dave, or did your parents actually call you Dave?
No, no, my parents called me David.
Mm.
There was no deliberate. I never went. I'm going to be Dave now. I think that just happened. My friends called me Bulmer at school, so it wasn't them either.
Hmm.
Why do you
Right.
ask?
I was just curious, really. But
Fair
now that
enough.
you're here,
Hello.
we have struggled to stay on the topic of steampunk.
Yes,
And
well, I mean, and I'm not going to really be able to help with that because I don't know anything about it. I'm struggling to think if I've even if I've seen or played or read anything that is steampunk, because I haven't even played BioShock yet.
Mm.
I've remembered there was one thing. Oh, but can you hear my voice? I've got this cold and I'm still fighting it off. Here's my cough medicine. Let me just have some of that.
Mm.
Mm.
Yep.
There's one thing that I did read, which is the difference engine, which is a Oh, is it Gibson? Let me check. Was it even called
Yeah,
the difference engine?
it is.
Um,
You were talking about that earlier.
Oh,
We-
right. Well, I read that nearly to completion, but I must have either got bored or started reading something else, like about a chapter away from the end, so I never quite finished it. So there you go. That's my that's my steampunk credentials in a nutshell, I'm afraid.
It's funny that you mentioned that because in what little research I did before we did this the other day, the difference engine is apparently hailed as the steampunk novel.
Is
That
it
has,
really? Well, that's interesting
yeah.
because usually when you have the something novel, so like the fantasy novel is Lord of the Rings, right?
Mhm.
And the sci-fi novel is arguably Dune. Some people will tell you it is, some people won't. But there are things like that. Whatever it is, it was probably written in the 60s, or the 40s, or the 20s, or something. You know what I mean? It's going to be old. The difference engine, I got the sense when I read it that it was new. Do you know when it
Yeah.
came out?
The 1980s-ish. Hang on, I've got it right here.
Oh,
1990.
then I'm completely wrong because I must have read something that was just a new edition because I read it about 10 years after that. Um, so fair enough. Still though, that's quite new. 1990. Is that and did that kick off steampunk? Was there no steampunk before that or what?
No, there was steampunk before that, but as Zachary and I were saying, steampunk is still very much in its infancy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Very much. So, and it some people, have you seen the old black and white movie Metropolis? Or are you familiar
Oh,
with
of
it?
course. No, I haven't, but
Yes.
of course.
That is apparently supposedly steampunk. I don't think it is.
Eh, I've seen Metropolis.
Yeah.
It treads a fine line. It definitely treads a fine line.
But wouldn't Metropolis is from the 20s, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So presumably the reason that it is steampunk is like the same way that things about the future made in the 80s look really 80s-y and stuff. It's just like what the
Yeah.
technology was, and they were then thinking ahead for future versions of it.
True, but I think if it was remade today, they would intentionally make it push it to be steampunk.
They absolutely would, because I mean, obviously, not to suggest they only had steam in the 20s, but that was what their trains were. So presumably, it was still an aesthetic they were into. In the same way that like Disney's Tomorrowland was all like 60s looking stuff, but futuristic.
I have a funny story about Tomorrowland that I only know because of a documentary I watched. But before I get to that, there's actually a scene in. Am I the only one that's seen Metropolis?
No, yes. I have seen Metropolis.
Well, I haven't.
Okay, there's a scene towards the beginning of the film where they actually are operating this giant furnace that keeps all the other machines alive, and so you actually see like this guy like. It's like one of the most iconic images is basically the guy's like using these handles and he's basically relegating the circuits of the city, diverting power and controlling it. And so I guess that would be steam power because it's meant to look like it's meant to look like the steam power plant from hell.
Yeah.
But the quick thing about Tomorrowland was actually designed by Werner von Braun.
Mm-hmm.
Who was a former... Werner von Braun is the German scientist who helped the United States kick off its space program.
Oh.
He was brought over to the U.S. under Operation Paperclip because he was the guy who designed the German V-2 rockets for Adolf Hitler.
Oh. Well, there we go.
So, but he designed it, and I guess Disney basically said, I want you to help me, because he understood rockets, and he understood how sequences in firing rockets work, so he was like, I want you to actually design what you think the world would look like according to what we have now, and of course make it more kid-friendly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So...
I went to Future World. We're talking Disneyland or World?
Land.
Yeah, I went to Future World there when that would have been in the Christmas of 1990, and certainly not
just when the different section was coming out.
Well, there you go. Certainly not futuristic. I can see, like in hindsight, when they built it, how they would have thought it would have been futuristic.
Yeah.
But like Dave was saying,
I think they made an effort to keep it that way. You know, when they made it, they thought it was super futuristic, and then after that, everyone was nostalgic for it, so they kept it that way for a long time.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's like you were saying earlier, Dave. Science fiction movies from the 80s, just by their very nature, look very 80s.
Yeah.
Future World is much the same, and I've got a link there. The 9 novels that defined steampunk.
Oh, great! Oh, I should read those. I should certainly read the difference engine again because I think I didn't get it. I went in expecting a lot more to be said about this giant computer machine thing, and the way I recall it, that was kind of backdrop, and actually it was just a detective murder story or something like that. But maybe I'm wrong about that because it was a long time ago I read it. I was a teenager, really.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just remembered that we were talking about if there was a remake of Metropolis, whether or not it'd be steampunk. But there was, wasn't there? Didn't Tezuka do a manga of it, and then there was an anime of it?
Oh, there was an anime. I have the anime of Metropolis, but from the interviews I read, they said it is in no way, shape, or form influenced by the old black and white movie.
That's weird, especially because I looked it up just now, And it says here that it is. This is Wikipedia, so you never know. It does say it's self-inspired by the 1927 German silent film, although the two do not share plot elements. So I guess that's it.
Yes,
Oh wait, it says the anime. It says that the anime, however, does draw aspects of its storyline directly from the 27 film. So like, I guess they put the two together for the anime or something like that.
What they did. What was like a lot of the aesthetics were inspired by the 27 film, like the giant ziggurat at the center of the city. There's in no way, shape, or form you can tell me that wasn't inspired by the Fritz Lang film, because it totally looks just like it. But they actually, Tezuka actually got accused when he wrote it and published it, that they said this is because he called it Metropolis, and they're just like, have you seen the movie? And he goes, no. And he actually said, no, I was just inspired to write a story about robots using my cast of characters.
But I find that movie is very much the anime. It's almost two movies, two very distinct halves. There's the overworld half and then the underworld half.
Yes. And I guess you could almost call that movie... That movie does have some steampunk elements to it. I mean, it's not fully steampunk, because clearly we're dealing with robots and machines and far more complex. I mean, hell, Tima is in herself the most complicated robot ever put together. Also, there is in no way, shape, or form that you cannot tell me that is not a young Brigitte Helm, because she looks just like Maria from Metropolis. Because in the original manga, she was a brunette. She was supposed to be.
Yes, I see your point. But also, I thought for a movie from the 1920s, that robot looked fantastic.
Yes.
I wonder if perhaps I wonder if they have or had a different approach to, like, maybe in the 20s in Japan, or whenever it was he did the manga, it was just okay to do mangas of existing things, and then when it made it overseas, it was like, have you seen this film? Because we're going to have a problem here. And he's like, I've been advised to say no.
Well, I know that the copyright laws in Japan are a little bit more relaxed than they are in the U.S. Fanworks they actually have entire sort of micro Comic-Cons celebrating fan-created works.
Yeah.
Which is why you get questionable material with like the Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z characters that probably shouldn't exist but does.
Bleach is unbelievably popular.
Excuse me. The fact that we haven't fully cottoned on to that explains quite a bit, because I can remember when I was a kid, or like when I was a teenager, first on the internet, and you would hear stuff. You'd be like, "Can you believe this is what the Pokemon manga is in Japan? Can you believe this is what the Sonic the Hedgehog manga is?" And they would all be, more or less unrelated to the source material and with porn in. And we would keep getting fooled by this and going, "Wait, really? That's,
Actually, the guy who created Pokemon originally drew porn for a living.
What, really?
The guy who was commissioned by Nintendo to draw the Pokemon manga in Japan had a career drawing porn.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant like the bloke who made the game.
No.
Yeah, because I just saw that recently, like the other day. So I don't know if I may have. In fact, perhaps I shouldn't have said Pokemon when I was thinking back, because I don't remember whether we saw it. Oh no, we did. There was the other one that was porny. But yeah, I saw that the other day, and it was the one where, there's a mix-up involving someone asks. Ash wants to catch a Pokemon, and someone asks him to get his balls out then, and the comedy ensues.
Yeah, I can imagine how it would with that particular comment.
Yeah.
But again, we've gone far off topic. But topic. Speaking of being off topic, I'll ask Dave: are you looking forward to the Star Wars series, Star Wars Rebels?
Yes, I am, though it's going to be a long wait for me because I've only just started watching Clone Wars. The first, essentially, I watched the film and it was just so terrible that I never watched any more of the series. But the number of friends that, for some reason, just among my circle of friends here in the UK, a lot of my friends are starting to watch it now, or well, in the last year or two, and are now finishing watching it and passing it on to others. And so I've got, on good personal authority that it gets very, very good. So I've now started watching it now that it's on Netflix. And so as a result, I'm only about 5 episodes into season 1, and allegedly I have to wait an entire season before it starts getting really good. It's all right at the moment. But as a result of that, I am already settled into the way it looks. So it's weird for me to look at the Rebels trailer and fully accept that. It feels like a step down to me because it seems less stylized, which to me speaks of less effort. But we shall see when it comes. And of course, it's going to look so much better than that 10 episodes into that. So, we'll see. But yes, I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to everything that's happening with Star Wars right now. I can't wait for the next film. Like, everything I'm reading about it just makes it sound like it's going to be really good.
Here's hoping. But the Clone Wars are graphically, like the subtleties of the graphics, the light play and the shadows, especially in the later seasons, looks fantastic.
So I hear. I understand that if you watch it, if you have a high-def source for it, I don't know what that might be, maybe it came out on Blu-ray, you can even see they've rendered paint strokes and, as if they are, because you know how they have that carved wood effect? Allegedly, they go to town with that, so you can actually see the sort of, what do I mean, like the patterning in the wood and things like that. I don't know exactly how true that is, but that's what I'm hearing, and that sounds great.
It's very true. Also, if you do get the Blu-rays, it's the more widescreen cinema scope type aspect ratio, like you would expect from a... Yeah, not just 16:9, it's like the full widescreen.
Oh, hang on. You know what? I reacted with surprise there, but now I'm remembering that they have got that version on Netflix as well, and I keep getting surprised by it when I watch an episode. That's interesting, isn't it? I guess that's to match, Star Wars.
Yeah. I hope they do that with Rebels as well. But again...
Now, Rebels... Sorry.
But,
sorry, it's such a terrible delay. You carry on.
I was just saying we've gone very off topic, but we're on Star Wars now, so just keep going.
Well, all I was going to say is that I was just going to ask that Rebels is that sort of set after Episode 3, before Episode 4, am I right?
Rebels is 5 years before Episode 4.
Oh, wow, cool. Oh, cool. See, that's really interesting. Now, is Rebels part of the set of expanded universe that is in fact going to be canon? Does it start there?
I don't know where it starts, but as I was saying to Zach earlier, the Star Wars canon goes like this. Anything that's on screen, movies, TV, is canon, followed by anything that's in print, followed by anything that's in a video game. Yes, but they've just announced that they're changing that. And that starting... Well, I don't... This is the question. Starting when, I don't know. But from now on, there is going to be no expanded universe. They're scrapping expanded universe. That's not a thing anymore. I mean, they're not going to, burn it all. It's not going to be like that George getting rid of the original trilogy. But that's no longer a thing. And from now on, whenever there are novels, whenever there are TV shows, they will in fact be made by the new overall universe story building team. And they will be canon. They will be considered canon. Now, that sounds a bit rich, because that was always the arrangement. As I understand it, there was an overarching story group. But it will be without that tiered agreement. It will, in fact, be all canon. So I'm wondering whether Rebels counts as that or not. And I'm wondering how the hell they're going to pull that off, because the whole reason we had to have expanded universe
is because there's just so much Star Wars merchandise that you can't control it all.
Right, so does this mean Clone Wars is no longer canon, or have they...
Well, that's the implication, yeah. I mean, I don't know. This is what I wonder. Let me
Because
find out.
the main thing I always wondered, or had to keep reminding myself of about Clone Wars, is that it's set between episodes 2 and 3, because it came out after episode 3.
Yeah.
And the episodes do not air in chronological order.
Yeah. Oh, right. Oh, interesting.
So I'm sure there's a fan pack out there somewhere where they've renumbered them so you can actually watch them in correct chronological order. And some of the actual episodes come chronologically before the Clone Wars movie.
Right. Oh.
You've looked it up?
I have looked it up. So it says here, to recap, this is the end of an article. The Clone Wars and the Rebels TV show is canon. Future books and games are canon. Everything else is not. So essentially, Chewbacca's alive. There are no Knights of the Old Republic. There is no Thrawn at this point, but they have the option of rebooting him and bringing him in, and everything, from here, everything is new.
So at the moment, everything that's canon is episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the Clone Wars.
Yes. It doesn't mention the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, but I believe there is a clash there with the other Clone Wars, so I'm guessing that's off limits.
The Flash animation.
Is it Flash? Is it Flash animation? It's clever Flash animation.
Well, 2D flat, not fancy CGI.
Yeah. Yes, that's that. The way I hear it from my friends, the two don't clash until you get to the very end of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, at which point they begin to. So we can keep part of that in our hearts and minds and discard part of it, I suppose.
Right. I'm quite happily discard all of that in favour for the CGI series, but I just wish Disney had let them finish it off, because apparently they had plans to bring it right up to where Episode 3 starts. So you'd finish off the Clone Wars, then you go into Episode 3.
Is that not... See, that's what I assume does happen, based on the fact that the end of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars does do that. So I was assuming that was where the clash came in.
No, the Clone Wars, the CGI doesn't get that far. And
or does it? Because they did a new season especially for Netflix, didn't they? Are you incorporating that?
No. You see, what happened there was they had so much written of a season when Disney cancelled it that the fans kicked up a stink. It's like, we've seen a preview for it. We know you've done the recordings. We know you've got the animation. We want to see it.
Right.
But when you watch it, it feels unfinished and just like one story arc, and then they just cut it off.
Well, look, I think I have an idea. No, I don't. Ignore that. I was getting confused. Yeah, they should.
But that final season does explore, because I always thought Order 66 just seemed very thrown in there. In Episode 3, it's like, we need a plot device to make the clones turn. The newest season of the Clone Wars actually sort of delves into that and makes it seem less sudden.
Oh, great.
It makes it a fuller experience.
Oh, brilliant.
Are you familiar with other genres such as cyberpunk, like The Matrix would be, the cyberpunk film? And
yes. I'm familiar with it from games more than anything else, and so to educate myself, I recently purchased. I was going to purchase the what's that? The Neuromancer, right? Because that's a big cyberpunk. But but I ended up instead over here with this, which is Burning Chrome, which is a collection of Gibson's cyberpunk stories from that universe, some of which predate the book. So are we interested to read both of those things?
Yeah. Well, could you show that up again? Sorry.
Burning Chrome.
Okay.
And
so I'm not a big reader. Dishonored.
Well,
that was the game I was talking about before. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh, yes.
Ah,
So, please continue, Dave. Sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah.
No, you didn't. It's the delay on the mics. Like, I'll pause for a
Oh.
long time, and nobody will say anything, and then I'll talk, but it turns out you've been saying something because of the delay. That's all it is.
Oh, okay. Because I was trying to think earlier before you were here to tell Zach, I was like, there's a game that came out recently that's a steampunk game, and I've just looked it up here on Steam, various steampunk games, and it's come up Dishonored. That's the game I was thinking of.
That's supposed to be good. It's meant to be a. Is it a tribute to Thief? There's a game series
yeah,
that
it's
very similar to.
it has, from what I've heard, it has elements similar to Thief, but it's a bit more. I think it's, I don't know. I have heard that it's very similar to Thief, but
Well, what I heard specifically was that it was similar to the spirit of older Thief games, if Thief is the series I'm thinking of, and does a slightly better job of being that series game than its more recent episodes have been. So people are enjoying it for that reason. It's meant to be good, Dishonored.
Yeah. So let's talk about cyberpunk, if that's something you're more familiar with. And Zach was telling me of a genre, biopunk.
Biopunk? Ugh, what's that?
more body modification, biotechnology.
Cool.
I guess Bioshock would fall into there.
Oh, really? I thought that was steampunk.
It's a combination. It depends on which. The first Bioshock, which is arguably my favorite game of all time, has a lot of body modification. So,
Yes.
like,
Well, you
especially
see,
with like,
yeah, there's a separate genre for that. Like, I thought body modification was part of cyberpunk. Honestly,
I think it falls into all categories technically.
Good, but I think also what
Because-
Zach is getting at, biopunk is not just like attaching a gun to your arm, but genetic modification, as in, giving yourself cat's eyes, or the ability to disguise yourself like an octopus against the wall.
In that case, I've read a great book like that, which is Sister Alice by Robert Reed. And this is a fascinating sci-fi novel that you've got to have a look at if you haven't. And it's one of these things where it's so far in the future that people can do things that are so ridiculous. Like, that concept of, like, indistinguishable from magic. But they are crafting planets. They're just with a wave of their hand. They're just controlling the universe. It's amazing. And he manages to ground a story in that about family that, that makes sense of that setting. But what it all sort of builds up to is there's this. It kind of ramps up and up and up in terms of like the stakes until you're in this fight between two people. And they're rocketing through space, and you almost can't quite tell what's happening. But what they keep doing is, like, adding and discarding... Abby, what do they call it? Is it skills? In Sister Alice, what is it they add to themselves? Is it skills, or is it something like that? It's a word like that. And he never, unless I read it wrong, talents. He never quite explains what that means. But the way he talks about it is that it sounds like they're adding organs to themselves, but not in the way we would think of them. It's like they're changing themselves physically to have these new abilities, including body parts, but sometimes not. And it's just fascinating to try and figure out what's even happening to them. So, Sister Alice, have a look at that. It's a great book.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find an e-version of it.
Yeah. Now, to be honest with you, Ian, if you said earlier that you're not much of a reader, you'll probably struggle through this one, but at least the first few chapters will be interesting. It's just that it's very long. But, from the off, it's fascinating because it starts with children playing a game, which is like kind of the futuristic equivalent of a snowball fight in a fort, except that the forts are like actual castle states that these children are able to just make somehow suddenly, and the snowballs are coming out of like rocket cannons, and they're killing each other. The children are blowing each other up, and so like one of them will get their face exploded, and just teeth everywhere and eyeballs everywhere, and then they'll turn around to their friend and be like, "Oh, thanks," and then they'll start having to rebuild themselves a new face, and it's really interesting.
That sounds like something I would enjoy, but I'm much more a visual person, so I like to see things on screen.
Yeah.
But also, just getting into reading, were you read to a lot as a child before you were capable of reading?
Yep.
Because recent studies suggest that children that were heavily read to, even before the concept of words was a thing in their mind, are much more likely to be readers and fast ones and good at it as they grow up.
That's no surprise at all. And my mum was a teacher, and so she had this theory that, you know, like bedtime stories.
Yep.
She disagreed with the idea, not vehemently, she wouldn't fight another parent, but she disagreed with the idea that you should read to a 5-year-old the books that 5-year-old can read. She thought that, and I agree with this, that you should be a few years above, or, well, I don't know how far she would go, but you should be reading books that they can't yet read, but which you, because you know the child and can speak to that child and be understood, can articulate to them so that they can take in new levels of storytelling. And that was always the theory there. And yes, sure enough, I went to school already fluent at reading several years above, you know, what the entry level is. So they would have to like scour the upper juniors area of the school for books for me to read.
Because I was only read to it at my level, to the point where I still enjoy children's books these days.
Oh, well, so do I. That's different. I mean,
have we all read? Go, Zach.
I still watch children's I still watch cartoons. Hell, the last show I watched was Gravity Falls.
That's meant to be brilliant. I haven't seen it yet, but it's supposed to be great, isn't it?
My wallpaper is of the Pyramid Man Bill Cipher.
Oh, for a minute there, I got excited because I thought you meant like in your bedroom, your actual wallpaper.
No, I wish. But no, it's Bill Cipher, the little like basically the eye on top of the dollar bill, the triangle eye, except he has a top hat, a bow tie, and then little arms. And the very first time he shows up, the universe is a lie. Reality is a hologram. Buy gold, and then it disappears.
There is no E version of Sister Alice.
Oh.
I'm just going to have to get fork out one whole cent for the.
Well, this is it. I mean, I got mine I got mine off my dad, but I think he got it for about 50p. You should be able to do better than that these days.
Yeah, I'd probably go to my local library and see if it's there.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yes, so children's books. I mean, you know, there are loads of good children's books coming out, so don't feel bad about that. But what are we talking about? Do we mean just Harry Potter or beyond that?
No, much more children-y than that. Even more children-y than Dinotopia.
Oh, so the Mr. Men.
Not good. There's one called Henry and Amy. And it's very well written, but it's pictures and just a little blurb at the bottom. But probably somewhere above Mr. Men, but somewhere below Dinotopia.
Nice.
Here I have my old copy of the... No, sorry, not my old copy. This is an old copy I have purchased of the Mr. Men Songs album, which is a genuinely good album. And I had it on tape as a kid. I've now bought the CD that just came out. And here we have a second Mr. Men LP of
nice.
The Mr. Men stage musical. There they are, from the 1980s. So I'm a sympathizer of people who appreciate books for the young.
Yeah, there was one by, I think, a Japanese artist, the Red Tree, and the Letter. That was I think the Letter. There's no talking; it's all pictures.
I still have when I was younger, I actually still have my copy of the Polar Express, which actually came with an audiobook version of it on cassette.
The Arrival. Yes.
as read
Was the,
by William Hurt.
was the audiobook of the was the audiobook read by a kind of a uncanny valley facsimile of a human voice?
No, it was actually read by the actor William Hurt.
Oh.
So when I actually, so when I saw the movie, I was just like, okay, it's going to be William Hurt as Santa Claus. And when it wasn't William Hurt as Santa Claus, I was so disappointed. Because I had grown up listening to this deep, monotone voice that actually sounded like Santa Claus. And so I was just like, yes, it'll be Santa Claus and William Hurt. Nope. But it was surprisingly good because he read it as if he were an adult looking back, nostalgic about the story.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of had that pain in his voice of that he knew how the story was going to end.
Oh, that sounds so much better than the horrible film.
Right. I just want
and then I also still have my copy of Where the Wild Things Are. So.
Okay. I just want to get onto this. I'll do a screen share of it.
Mm-hmm.
The Arrival, and this is it here, and this is what you're seeing there is the book, and that's the story. What you're seeing right there. There are no words anywhere in this book.
Oh, weird.
Oh,
cool.
It's done entirely through pictures like that.
Huh.
Gosh.
That's an interesting
It's
concept.
It's a
Really?
good read.
Yeah, I mean, when you said there's no words, I just thought you meant either a silent comic like the Snowman, or like. But it's almost like some of those pictures seem like they're just drawn from anywhere, but build up the idea of the world you're in and things. That sounds really interesting.
They do. It's really good, but there's a story. There's a story with characters and and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do we have anything more to say on the topic of steampunk, cyberpunk, and biopunk?
Right. Cyberpunk.
Is...
Yes. Yes, I've got something to talk about with cyberpunk because cyberpunk is something which in the UK really sort of suddenly took off in an odd way, and I think it probably had something to do with 2000 AD. I think that there must have been a lot of it in that. And as a result of that, we went through a spate of having very good games, computer games, Amiga games, that were, and PC games, but I had an Amiga at the time, that were cyberpunk based. And the ones that spring immediately to mind are Syndicate and Beneath the Steel Sky, which are both absolute classics of computer gaming.
Yep.
Still good now. Can't wait for Satellite Rain. And they're just absolutely marvelous. And these are both, I mean, I suppose I ought to sort of vaguely explain them for anyone listening who doesn't know them, but they probably do because they are widely sold on things like GOG, and I think there's a Beneath the Steel Sky Android iOS version now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's did you say something then?
No.
Oh, I thought you did. Yeah, Beneath the Steel Sky was a point-and-click game. Think Monkey Island, but cyberpunk. You were, the kind of the black trench-coaty guy who talked in a serious kind of voice. And it was a point-and-click game. You point-and-clicked your way around solving puzzles and things, and it was really funny. And there was this wonderful concept, which was that you had a robot friend. I still can't think of anything else that this is in, even though it's so obvious and it should be in everything. Presumably it's in a lot of actual science fiction novels. But your robot sidekick, it doesn't matter what body he's currently in, he's essentially... You carry his memory card around with you, and you keep putting it in different things. So he gets to appear as different in different bodies. I don't know how often this happens because I never finished it, but it happens at least like once or twice. And what a great concept! And why do we not see more of that? And that was interesting because apart from anything else. The backgrounds, I believe, certainly the art direction of some description, but I think maybe the actual backgrounds were done by Dave Gibbons, the artist who did Watchmen. So it has a lot of sort of cachet that way. Certainly he did a comic that came with the game, which is now, and I think was then on the PC version, incorporated into the game as a kind of an animated intro. But it was a comic that he wrote and drew. Oh, sorry, that he drew. I don't know who wrote it, and that came physically with the game. And then Syndicate. Oh my God, Syndicate! Not the game you can get on the Ubisoft Uplay store. Not the FPS. It was a top-down. What do you call them? RTS game in which you've got these 4 agents that are cyborgs. You've built them up between levels, and you're basically amassing money, and you use it to research new body parts and then purchase them for your agents. And you move them around these cities that you get as the levels, and you have to undertake certain missions. And sometimes there'll be assassination missions, sometimes there'll be other stuff. But you have this arsenal of weapons, and the most interesting is the Persuadertron, which allows you to walk past someone and persuade them. They get this blue light over them, and suddenly they're on your side, which means that in some missions where what you're trying to do is get someone onto your side, like an enemy scientist or something, then that's how you finish the mission. But the rest of the time, what it means is that you can just walk past citizens, who are all, I'm happy to say, punks. Nearly all, they've all got like the blue sticky uppy hair and all sorts of things like that. Then they'll essentially form a human shield around you once they are Persuadertroned. And then you've got Uzis and flamethrowers and things. And there's just, I don't know, there's something there was just something about the way it moved, the way it controlled, the speed of it, that it was one. Well, I mean, it was by Bullfrog, who, have they ever made a bad game? They were a wonderful company who made all the stuff like Theme Park and Dungeon Keeper and everything like that, and and Populous, I think, or at least Bullfrog kind of spun off from that group. And what that means is that it had their touch on it, which means that just no matter what kind of game it was, they would make it feel right, which is one of the most important things about games, and which so few people get right. They got it right every time, and Syndicate's one of those. So the hope is that feeling will remain alive in Satellite Reign, as in the reign of a king, Satellite Reign, which is the kick-started sequel, but without owning the rights to Syndicate, which is coming out, being made by the people who made Syndicate, or at least Syndicate Wars, its sequel. Any time soon, I guess. It was successfully funded. Whether it'll come out or not, we don't know.
Right.
That's, I guess, that's where my most experience with Cyberpunk comes from. So I need to read Neuromancer and really get into what it was all about.
I feel like we can't talk about Cyberpunk without talking about The Matrix.
Okay.
Or have you seen Circuitry Man?
No.
No.
Have you heard of Circuitry Man?
Nope.
Well, we won't worry about it.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, I haven't seen it in full myself. My sister was in it. It's a post-apocalyptic future. Hang on a sec. How do you even spell circuitry? Circuitry.
I found it.
Goody.
Here's the Wikipedia article.
With Dennis Hopper. There was, basically it's a poster with guys wired into his head. Wires in his head. Hang on, I'll do a screen share of this. There we go.
Nah.
Yeah.
The Earth's atmosphere has been destroyed. Survivors have been forced underground, and the future is controlled by Plughead. His pleasure is giving pain and feeling it by jacking into the minds of his victims. Now he's got the ultimate weapon to rule what's left of life on Earth. All that stands in his way is the android circuitry man and the beautiful FBI agent Kyle. They've teamed up for a shocking showdown with the Prince of Pain. Then the name of the actors.
That sounds brilliant.
I found it somewhat budget back in that. It wasn't really my kind of thing. I may enjoy it more now than I did back then.
Mm-hmm.
But that was very much a cyberpunk film. But then along comes The Matrix and does cyberpunk in high budget.
Actually, there was one movie that came out before The Matrix, same year, but was a little bit better at least in my opinion.
Yeah?
And when Dave gets back, I'll get into it.
Okay.
Alright.
I
was actually just looking up Circuitry Man, and according to this, Plughead is played by an actor named Vernon Wells.
As in Orson Welles?
No relation. But Vernon Wells played Bennett in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando.
Oh, okay. A film I've still
He
yet
also
to see.
he also played Wes in Mad Max 2.
Ah, the film I've still yet to see. Is the movie you were going to mention with about the Matrix? Does it star Robin Williams?
No, not Bicentennial Man. No.
Okay. Well,
No.
Dave is back, and he claims there's a movie that did the Matrix better than the Matrix did the Matrix.
Have you ever heard of the movie Dark City?
Yes, I have seen the movie Dark City.
Yes.
I have not seen it, but I've heard of it, and I may have heard of it in context of how similar The Matrix was to it.
Basically, Dark City is... I'll just sum up it really quick. Dark City is everyone lives inside of this city, and it's sort of like a neo-noir city where it's always night.
It actually came out 1 year before The Matrix. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. And basically, you find the main character wakes up naked in a bathtub. And he's just kind of like, and he wakes up and he's got no idea where he is. He goes into his hotel room. There's a dead hooker laying there. And he knocks over a goldfish bowl and then picks up the goldfish, throws it in the bathtub.
Yeah.
The detectives show up because there's the guy who's been going around killing women. And they're just like, it's the same cold-hearted killer, all this stuff. And he spirals into his victims. They aren't sure why. The lead detective on the case actually went crazy, so they're not exactly sure what's going on. And the detective pauses and he goes, "What kind of serial killer would stop and save a goldfish?" And he looks because the goldfish is swimming around in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "What kind of serial killer saves a goldfish?" And he's just kind of confused. But he's trying to figure out who he is because he has amnesia. The lead character, John Murdoch, he ends up coming across these group of men all wearing these black overcoats. And they're pale and bald. And there's Mr. Hand, Mr. Book, Mr. Finger. And they all have the ability to...
Is one of them Richard O'Brien?
Yes, he plays Mr. Hand.
In that case, I have seen this. But, I may have only watched half of it. It was one of those, lazy days round a friend's apartment situations, mainly concentrating on the pizza and the conversation. So I'm going to have to watch this again, because I remember thinking it was pretty cool.
It's really awesome. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but one of the big things is there's this doctor that shows up, played by Kiefer Sutherland, who he manufactures memories for these creatures, because the whole city, they're a little petri dish where they're trying to figure out how to create what makes the human soul. And so there's actually this really great scene of him sitting at this table with a microscope, and he's just like, let's see, a little bit of young love, death in the family, romance, and he basically puts together a memory inside of a syringe, and so it's kind of this biopunk. Some cyberpunk elements get downplayed, but it's more of a bio neo noir punkish sort of thing because he actually injects people. They actually show these people going into going into people's homes, and one of the greatest scenes in the entire movie is there's this guy sitting at his dinner table with his wife, and the table's barely bigger than a desk. And their apartment is small as can be. It's like you can tell they're poor. They're just this poor family. And the guy's just like, I think I might get laid off. They're cutting back hours at the factory. Well, the creatures put them to sleep, put the new memories inside, change their clothes. Suddenly the table fills up the entire room. He's wearing this suit. She's wearing pearls and lace. The kids have their own bedrooms, and they're like really big. And he just goes, I think I'm going to have to lay off some factory workers today, dear. And so, and I'm just like, and then I saw The Matrix, and I was like, actually, I saw The Matrix before that, and I'm watching Dark City, and I was just like, wow, this is hitting some of the same beats as The Matrix, but The Matrix added in martial arts, so everyone was like, oh my god, like, all the fighting and stuff, which was cool, admittedly, but Dark City was a bit more like, let's approach this subject as an actual, like, what constitutes memory, the spiral, the circling of everything, how everything just repeats itself. Where are we in the universe? Why are we here? And it has one of the greatest twists it has one of my favorite twists in a movie. And I'm not going to say what it is, because it is just fantastic, because when they get to it, you expect many things. You expect so many things to happen. And then, when it does, you're just kind of like, wait, what?
I wonder if I didn't get to that, because I get the sense that we may have had to break off in the middle, and wouldn't that be interesting if I never quite saw that resolution? So, yeah, I look forward to that.
Here's the thing about now Zach said that there is a surprise ending, so now your mind is pre-spoiled, and throughout the film you'll be forever trying to guess, even if you're not trying to do it, what is the surprise ending.
That's true, but I'll have forgotten by then.
Oh, well,
also, if you can, watch the director's cut, because the theatrical cut spoils the movie in the first 2 minutes.
Oh, I hate that.
Because the licensing company in the state, it was an Australian-based film, filmed like it was from the director of The Crow.
Yeah.
And he actually, like, he showed it to the producers, and the producers just like, okay, this is great, but the company that licensed it in the States and put it out, the distribution company, I think it was Miramax, they put in a 2-minute narration that spoils the entire movie.
Ah!
Because they felt that people wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
They thought the audience would be so stupid they wouldn't understand what was going on.
That's the worst. One of the worst ones for that I've ever seen was the movie adaptation of The Golden Compass, where it's not exactly that they ruined a twist, but it could be seen as a twist. And what it certainly is something that you're supposed to gradually figure out as the story goes on. And they just laid it out right at the start. And so suddenly there's essentially no point in the first story, which is how in the books that concept is introduced to you through the first book and its progression. So you might as well skip straight to the second one, which they never made. So,
yeah. I actually was one of the few people that liked The Golden Compass, and actually my sister, because she saw the movie, she actually went and read the book. Yeah. Because she was curious, because she thought it was a fascinating little. She thought it was a wonderful little movie, and so she was like, I want to watch this. I want to see I want to read this.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, presumably it works for that. But I couldn't. I couldn't get past I couldn't get past the first half hour, partly because of the narration, partly because of just the disappointment that that's what they're doing. That you know, it advertised that they weren't gonna make it as intriguing as the book was, and mostly because of the child actors who were just the worst in that first half hour, and I just had to switch it off.
Actually, they that came out here in the States the same time as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Mm.
And they released a news. They actually ran an article about the Golden Compass and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they said why the Golden Compass. I think it was called "Why the Golden Compass Failed, but The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe didn't." And it was because no. They basically said, ignoring all the technical stuff, the subject matter of the movies. People in the States viewed the Golden Compass as an attack on religion.
Religion, yeah.
Which I read a few articles and things about the books, and I really want to read the books now.
Read the books. Yeah, I remember when they were talking about adapting it into a film. I hadn't read them all, but I'd read the first two, I think. And in fact, my mum read me the first one. I was, I said that that she would read beyond my level. Well, there came a point where essentially she was good at it. She was, she would perform these things to an extent, and so I was still getting read these books, like beyond where you would normally have a bedtime story, because it was a kind of it just became a kind of fireside family tradition type thing that Mum would read us these things. And so Golden Compass, I think, came out when I was, I don't know, quite old, I suppose. Let me find out when it came out. But she did read that first one, not the second one. No, okay. I guess not then, because apparently it came out in 1995, and she definitely stopped by then. So maybe we just talked about it a lot, and that's why I got the impression. But anyway, there was a tape, wasn't there, that was like a dramatization of it. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But anyway, but I'd read the first couple of books, and when the film was coming out, there was this. It was like there was sacrilege. Like all the discussion about it on the internet was like they're doing his Dark Materials as films, and they're not doing the part where they try and kill God. How can you do it? And I never got to that point in the books, but the Philip Pullman is, very noisily, or was at the time, very noisily atheist, and was open about the fact that he was writing his books as a kind of a screed to sort of push children away from that direction, and a good one, not in a fundamentalist kind of sense. And so there was this sense of like, well, how can you do it? Because the villain in the series is the Magisterium, which is the church. And I don't know how they did it because I couldn't get through the film. Is it touched upon in the film? Did they get there?
No, they actually very carefully tiptoe around they do vilify the church, but they tiptoe around the fact that they actually do at one point, if I remember correctly, they actually do refer to at one point. Nicole Kidman sitting down talking to the little girl, and she says, "It's the Magisterium. It's the will of the authority." And that's all they say. And when I heard that, I was just like, "What the hell is the authority?"
Yeah.
I Googled it, and that was at that point where I just went, "I think I'm in love." Because I was like, but it was, they very carefully tiptoed around it, and then they like threw in some bull crap about. There was a 30-minute sequence about polar bears.
That is in the book. That's in.
I know,
but
right. I gathered that, but at the same time, the movie was like going along at this breakneck pace, and then they slowed down for polar bears, and so the movie was just kind of tonally all over the place too, and it was very.
what you might be interested in, because you obviously haven't yet read the books, and that you'll have some reason for that. So maybe what you might be interested in is the fact that they brought out, when the books were new, before the films, they brought out They brought out an audiobook version of all 3 books. But instead of being narrated by someone, it was actually narrated by Philip Pullman, the author. But it was a full cast dramatization of it. But as far as I know, unabridged. So it was the whole book, but with a cast and with sound effects and music and stuff. Which, God, I don't know why all audiobooks aren't done that way. So you might be interested to try that out.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Part of the problem is, like, they tiptoed around it. If they'd faced it head on, it could have potentially been a more successful film.
Yeah.
Rather than
be straight here's the thing. Here's the thing, and this is an honest to goodness, sad truth about my dearly beloved home. We are terrified of anything that spits in the face of religion.
Mm-hmm.
There are actually whole movie, like, I think there's actually been a couple of movies that people got angry at. Dogma. The Kevin Smith movie, Dogma.
Good film.
Which a lot of critics hate, like a lot of critics in the religious community were just like, this movie is filth because it's making fun of God. And Kevin Smith later was interviewed, and he said, I'm not making fun of God. He's like, I was brought up in a religious family, and this is the stuff I started thinking of when I became an adult. He's like, I'm not attacking religion. I'm poking fun at some of the stuff that I found a little weird.
And yet, the premise here is that, America is frightened of anything that criticizes religion and so on. But everyone's heard of Dogma. It didn't ruin the career of Kevin Smith as a popular film. Right. So it's obviously there is obviously enough people out there to watch a film like that, and it would have been interesting.
Right.
I didn't realize that the Golden Compass came out at the same time as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is an openly a Christian allegory. So wouldn't that have been interesting to have these 2 competing children's fantasy films that are that one is the Christian one and one is the atheist one? Oh gosh, we're in 3D.
Yes. Yeah, it would have been really interesting because Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is, I mean, I read the book. I actually, just like how you had your mother read to you, my father read to me. Except he read to me the Harry Potter books when I was when they came out. However, my third grade teacher, she sits down and she's just like, okay, kids, today we're going to be reading a book. And she's like, she had like her little reading time on like Fridays, and she goes, we're reading The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. And she read to us The Magician's Nephew, a book that I was just like, it was the most wondrous thing. And so I read all the books. But yeah, so I actually had my third grade teacher was just like, I'm going to read to you this book that is by accounts children's books, but it's for more oriented towards older kids. But I remember reading Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was a fantastic book. It makes a lot more sense if you read The Magician's Nephew. But
The Magician's Nephew came out in terms of published last, did it not?
Yeah. He wrote it basically kind of like, okay, here's a little backstory about Narnia, the White Witch, and how they came to, and why did the caretaker in the second book know about the powers of the wardrobe?
Right. Also, just getting back to the Golden Compass, you can actually read it as an omnibus edition, which has a title unto itself, which is His Dark Materials.
Yeah, but that was always the name of the series.
I love that title. I love that title.
Yeah. What are his dark? Wait, the Golden Compass, the something knife, and the something something.
Subtle knife, and the something something. Yeah.
The amber glass.
Oh.
Spyglass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like yeah, they like to. That's one thing I've noticed when we get stuff. They like to change the title a lot.
Oh, was it the amber glass in America?
Yes.
But that's weird because wasn't
The
it
amber
used
spyglass.
for spying? Wasn't it a spyglass in the story where you spy? Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do. Most obvious one was Harry Potter.
Yes,
The very
Philosopher
first one.
Sorcerer.
Yeah, and I was just like, Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. I'm just like, to hell with the Sorcerer's Stone. I like this Philosopher's Stone actually has credence to it. It has mythology to it.
In 1980, not very much. I was a big fan of a computer game, or a computer game series called the Magic Knight series. And in the first one of the first items you find is the Philosopher's Stone. So I was happy to see it, when Harry Potter came out. Oh, the Philosopher's Stone, it kind of was a bit of a hook. But the thing is, the Philosopher's Stone is not a Sorcerer's Stone, and it is a thing that exists in, mythology for a long time. And
Yeah.
that's so stupid, calling it, because we UK kids didn't know what the Philosopher's Stone was until we read the book either. It's not as if, oh, I won't read that because I don't know what it is. But Sorcerer's Stone, I get that,
Yeah. And I guess it's
I guess they wanted wizard in the title, and that was the closest they could come.
Yeah, they I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, back to film really quick. Mad Max 2 was retitled in the United States to just The Road Warrior.
Really?
And in fact, yes. And in fact, I think it was Roger Ebert's review, he basically said, "Did you know there was a Mad Max 1?" And basically said, "I did, because I saw it at a festival." And he goes, "But people going into this movie will have no idea that it is the sequel to another movie. Because it was just advertised as The Road Warrior. It wasn't until most recently that people started calling, oh yeah, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, as it was called elsewhere." And so, for the longest time, I still have the DVD sitting on my shelf, and it's weird because I have Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and then Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And so, yeah.
Yep.
But, yeah. And it's just those little subtle things that...
It doesn't happen very often here, but it happens sometimes, and the most recent sort of example was the Avengers, which was called Avengers Assemble here. And honestly, that makes sense to me, firstly because the Avengers is an extremely famous television series here in the UK, which has nothing to do with Marvel.
Right.
And secondly, because Avengers Assemble kind of sounds like Batman Begins, and it's also their catchphrase, so it actually works quite well as the name of their first film, I think, because they assemble.
Actually, I do know about the British TV show The Avengers because my dad was a fan of it when it first aired. He used to watch it when he was a kid. So
yeah.
Yeah, so he actually, because one day it was on TV and he goes, "What's this?" He goes, "This is The Avengers." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, I used to watch this as a kid." And so he's like sitting there like, but yeah, I was like, what was that? It was something. I'm trying to remember because there was another movie that got But yeah, that is just it is interesting because sometimes it can completely change the outlook of the movie or the book. Or I do know that The Portrait of Dorian Gray was severely edited when it was published.
And
it was.
Finish your thought, and I think we'll leave it at that for this week, if that's okay by everyone.
Yeah. No, just since we were talking about edits, that the Portrait of Dorian Gray was actually severely edited because Oscar Wilde was a homosexual, and so there was some homosexual content in the Portrait of Dorian Gray. And it wasn't until most recently, at least in the States, that it was published uncut. And that they actually put in all the original material, which a lot of people were just like, wow, this actually explains so much more about the character because because the character used to be kind of like really flat and bland, but now they all of a sudden added like new depth. But that is just kind of weird how some things get renamed, some things get changed when they go to a different country. Yeah. And to think we were talking about Cyberpunk just like 20 minutes ago. Huh.
It's been somewhat of a mess of an episode, hasn't it? In terms of, okay, let's have a vote for next week. Next week, superheroes or Star Wars?
Either of them. I'm trying to think if there's a reason, if there's going to be any news that will be itching to discuss about either of those. I'm not aware of any. So you can honestly flip a coin.
I was thinking of holding back for Star Wars for the release of the first episode of Star Wars Rebels in October.
Right. Well, so feel free to do that. I will not have seen it, though, if that's important. If that's going to be important to the podcast.
It won't be because it'll just be Star Wars as a thing, as a part of pop culture.
Yeah.
Although it will help to have an opinion on where you think the Rebels series is going. Because I've noticed we do tend to talk about Star Wars. It pops up every now and again, so it might as well have one whole thing dedicated to it. So I think next week we'll do superheroes.
Okay.
Maybe rather because before comics was just generally speaking about comics.
I've just realised I won't be here next week. I will be. I'll be performing at a comic convention. I'll be doing a show, doing songs and things. So,
nice.
So that's me out, I'm afraid, for next week. But I'll be back the following week.
Okay.
Nice.
And that's fair enough because I'm not very knowledgeable about superheroes anyway. So that might be quite a good topic to do without me. To just throw my oar in now, I kind of know a bit about superheroes, but I'm no collector or long-term reader of the comics or anything like that. So I just know about the films that everyone knows about. So go ahead, really, and discuss that without me.
Right. All right. So I'll see you back here, Zach. Because Zach, I know his father collects comics, and you've been brought up with superheroes.
Oh yeah, I am versed in. I was brought up being explained who Thor was, who Iron Man was. I think I was like 6 years old. My dad was just like, "Oh yeah, there's more than Batman out there." He's like, and he basically started listing superheroes, and I was like, "Seriously?"
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll stop the podcast there now, and we'll see Zach, and hopefully Maddie will be here next week as well. So see you all in a week. Thank you very much.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.